Should hard games have a difficulty option? TLDR, yes, but let me tell you why. Yo gamers, my name is Flaws. Just a little gaming backstory on me. My first Souls game was Sekiro in 2019, into Elden Ring in 2023, and then I slowly eased my way into Darksouls 1 to 3, and fast forwarding to 2024, I started my Hollow Knight journey as my first ever 2D platformer, and it was quite the experience, where I completed P5, which is the hardest and most draining thing you can do in the game in my honest opinion. And this is of course excluding mods, and oh yeah, I did Steel Soul as well first try. Steel Soul is basically a hardcore feature where if you die, you have to restart. And then came Shadow of the Erdtree DLC with Elden Ring, and I parried all the bosses that I could on my first playthrough. So I guess you could say that I am one of the okayest gamers out there. And I personally think that all of these games that are considered hard should definitely have an option to tone down the difficulty. Not for me per se, because I do in fact love a good challenge, but I do not think that other people should miss out on an opportunity to experience these kind of games due to them being in the general perspective of things rather difficult. And I know that there are a lot of elitist people out there who is gonna go ahead and say, just do what Hornet tells you to do and get good. First of all, she doesn't even say that in Silksong. And second of all, Mr. John Hollow Knight, not everyone has the spare time or the reflexes like you do. Some people may even just want to experience the games for its rather good story, or the amazing art that most games are these days. But how will we scale down the difficulty of these games? Because we can't just be critical without coming up with good solutions as to how it could be fixed. So let us start with the new release of Silksong. And here is a spoiler warning, since I can't really talk about this without bringing some examples, but it will only be early game stuff. First of all, we could remove the 2 mass damage from all enemies, so casual players will have more leeway to learn the boss's patterns. And then here is another great idea, because Hollow Knight was really good at displaying this. And what I mean by this is that some of the bosses you meet early on have slow but very well telegraphed attacks, whereas later on you would encounter their prime versions and they are mostly way faster than their counterpart. However, they are optional, whereas in Silksong, almost every single boss is speed incarnate, with a 2 mass damage per attack. And you would think that would be late game bosses that would do so much damage, but quite frankly, that is wrong. I mean, some of the early bosses does 1 damage per hit, so that's fine, but still, they're mandatory. Then John Hollow Knight could return and say, but Flaws, you're supposed to play Hollow Knight before Silksong. Whereas my response to that would be, of course. But that shouldn't stop Team Cherry from having a story mode feature, where bosses are just a bit slower and does 1 damage overall. I think that will be a great start, and yes, go and play Hollow Knight before Silksong. I am most definitely a casual when it comes to games in general, because there are obviously games out there that are way harder than this. But I am gonna be talking about the games that I know of, otherwise I wouldn't be able to come up with something constructive to fix this issue. So let us talk about the From Software games. I don't really see Sekiro as a Souls game because it is so vastly different. So I am gonna be singling this game out, and funny thing is, Sekiro has a demon bell, that if you ring that bell, the game becomes harder. But overall, I feel like Sekiro might be on the easier end of these games, but of course a story mode difficulty could mean that enemies did less damage, your parry timing would be much higher, your guard doesn't break super easily, so you could potentially hold it in and just experience the boss overall and learn the patterns that way. Let's move on to the Dark Souls series. It is actually crazy for me to even mention these games for the story, because while the story is okay at best, it is so convoluted and cryptic that you would have to read item descriptions and understand doth thou hath. While it does make NPCs sound to some degree cooler, it doesn't add much to the story because not everyone understands that kind of English. And I am obviously speaking from an English-speaking perspective because I don't know what it's like in other translations. But the games overall is absolute cinema, and some might even go ahead and call those games horror farming. But I guess in story mode it would just be farming. But you know, story mode could just be sightseeing because the worlds that From Software has built are aesthetically beautiful. And in these games it is all about art direction and not how many millions of pixels there are in the game. Because From Software has been using the same engine for many years, making slight improvements here and there, but there is the saying that goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I agree. But in case story mode were to happen, I would decrease mob density in some areas, because to me it is the environment and normal enemies that are usually the biggest thorn in your sides. So decreased mob density could be a good thing for story mode. And of course the reduction of enemies' damage would also be welcome in that feature. And I know that John Darksouls is typing furiously on the keyboard right now. Jesus, gamer guy flaws, it is the whole point of those games to be unforgiving and hard. And it's just not for everyone. While that is a good argument, but quite frankly, that is not the point. Because you know how much you love these games, and why would you gatekeep others who has way less time than you to actually experience this kind of masterpiece? And while From Software would be added with the story mode, they may as well bring out even harder modes too. They could do what they did to Dark Souls 2, New Game Plus wise, where you would question yourself, was there an enemy there in my first playthrough? Now on to Elden Ring. This game is a bit different than Dark Souls due to the fact that it is open world, and I don't recall any issues with mob density when you literally just pause. And most people are saying that this game is the easiest in the series due to the builds and the cheese you can do in this game. I mean, come on, someone literally one-shot Consort Radahn with a pot? And he has 46,000 health? But I hardly believe someone wants to do the preparation of an astronaut in order to achieve such a one-shot. So there are a lot of ways to make Elden Ring easier due to the simple fact that it is open world. So if you're stuck at something, you can always return later stronger. I don't really have any pointers as to how the story mode in this game would work, because I feel like the normal version is good enough. And you have every opportunity to get stronger and use the strongest build. I feel like you guys are understanding what it is that I am putting down. This was just some ideas to make people who are lacking the time to get good at video games to also being able to experience absolute masterpieces. And if you are against these ideas, well, then you should take a hard look at yourself and ask yourself the question, why don't I like this? These games having an easy mode does not diminish your achievements in said games. So this doesn't affect you whatsoever, so maybe it is time to relax a bit and let people enjoy what you've enjoyed, yeah? Feel free to leave your constructive feedback in the comments, because idea bad, lol, is not being helpful. Thank you all so very much for watching. The friendliest of reminders to leave a like and subscribe to stay tuned for more. It helps me a ton, so thank you in advance. And also, I have playlists of most of the games that I have mentioned, so feel free to check them out. This has been Flaws, and until next time, 3, 2, 1, fades away.